Hey guys, it's yours truly coming back at you all with another one. And listen to me carefully. Everyone out there always says that they have the best this and the number one that. But you guys know I bring you the raw, unfiltered truth. I ain't watering nothing down. I let you guys know straight up the strengths and weaknesses of every deck and combination, and either how to break them or try to keep them from being broken. And today, you guys have witnessed the power of the red dragon firsthand, so you guys knows its strength. Now it's time for you to experience the deck list firsthand, and I have count them, four deck profiles to break down for you guys, and each, in my opinion, their ratings as well as their strengths and weaknesses. We start with the first one, and I want you guys keep in mind that when you're playing red dragons, unless you can get into, and this is not one of the decks that has a crystal wing in it, unless you can get to a crystal wing to be able to negate Nibiru's effect, Nibiru is always going to be one of the major weaknesses this deck has, getting Nibiru. The good part is you can play past the Nibiru. The bad part is depending on your combo situation, meaning via hand in graveyard, if you can. If that's not set up appropriately, then when you get Nibiru, it can potentially shut you down entirely. So that's one of the major weaknesses with all red dragon decks, no matter what you play. Unless you can get into that crystal wing, it's going to cause some issues. There is still another version that I haven't attempted to create. I have the idea in the head, and it actually would incorporate the Sword Soul engine, just to see getting into that Synchro 10 for protection and then being able to combo off. That is the fifth version that I would attempt to create, but so far I've done four. I want to give you guys these four so you can have them to your leisure, and also understanding their strengths and weaknesses, as well as my card choices for the deck and why I play those cards. And I also need you guys to keep in mind that card choices, and I've said this multiple times, card choices during deck construction are all player preference. You do not have to play what I play. Play what works for you. Do not allow anyone to dictate to you how to play your deck, what you should or what you have to play. They can recommend cards, but do not allow them to force their opinion or their perception of what they perceive to be success on you. Everyone is uniquely different, has a different playing style and tactic. Therefore, play what works for you. Like I said, with all red dragon decks, Nibiru is a troublesome card to deal with. The more combo centric of a deck you play, you can get Nibiru and keep going. It all depends on what you're playing. This one utilizes the rocket engine, meaning that you're going to be locked into darks straight through. That is why the extra deck in its entirety is all dark. So if you do end up in a Sword Souls matchup and they summon that Whim monster, can't remember the name, that locks out a specific attribute such as dark, you won't have access to your extra deck, and that right there is troublesome. So that's also another weakness when you're playing the rocket engine to facilitate the red dragon Archfiend. Let's run through the deck list real quick, starting with the main deck. Play one copy of Effect Veiler, two copies of Synchron Resonator, two copies of Chain, one Red Nova, one Honest Rocket Dragon, one Rocket Synchron, two Psy Reflectors, three copies of the Maxi, self-explanatory, one Red Resonator, one Creation Resonator, this is to be swapped with Ghost Bell. It should be two copies of Ghost Bell, not a copy of Ogre. When I originally was making this deck, I only had one copy of Bell, so I placed in a copy of Ogre just as a substitute. I hadn't changed it, I was supposed to, but this is actually to be 2 copies of Ghost Belt. The reason why I'm playing 2 copies of Ghost Belt, first and foremost, that runic matchup. That runic matchup can be annoying at times, and you need a way to continuously shut out that field spell from recycling 3 of their spells to draw 3 more cards. So having 2 copies of Ghost Belt is excellent to assist with that, so you can help shut down that runic matchup. That gets annoying real quick when they can recycle. You don't mind getting 10 to 15 cards banished from your deck, especially if your deck already plays Part of Demise. Not Part of Demise, sorry. Part of... whichever part that is that banishes 10, draw 2. You don't mind having 10 or more cards banished. You just don't want to keep that cycle happening. You want to be able to prevent that. So having 2 copies of Ghost Belt is excellent. Also, secondly, for Call by the Grave, sometimes you'd go Ash to turn off that branded fusion, and they go Call by the Grave. Now you can go Bell in response and ensure that that branded fusion does not go off. Or you'd go Max C so you can gain an advantage and put your opponent in a dilemma where they are forced to choose between either pressing to try to get through and give you a card advantage hand wise, or stalling and not making a move and putting themselves in a position to get OTK or be pressed by your red dragons. 3 copies of Ash, self-explanatory, and it is good against the runic matchup. I must put that out there. Bell works when they would try to recycle from the graveyard. Bell stops that. Ash stops it when they would try to draw. So no matter what, when the effect triggers and they try to recycle, Bell stops that because of the recycle from the graveyard, and Ash stops it because of them attempting to draw 3 cards. So having 5 hand traps in the deck, that is really good against the runic matchup. Like I said, in this format, it's about what decks are adequate enough to be able to contend with what is being played. You then play 1 copy of Assault Beast, small assault mode engine, 1 Red Gardener, 1 copy of the Magna Rocket Dragon, 2 copies of the Rocket Tracer, 3 copies of the Rocket Recharger. This guy is heavily underrated because once you swarm the field with your red dragons, if they get destroyed by somehow, way, shape, form, fashion, and this guy is in hand or on field, he can send himself to the graveyard. You can then target any of your other dark synchro monsters that got destroyed, preferably one that you're not trying to revive, and then you can select any other dark synchro monster in your graveyard, and you can then special summon that back from the graveyard to the field. So he helps get your red dragons back on board. 2 copies of Nibiru, excellent against that Sword Souls matchup when they would try to combo off just before they can make that synchro 10. 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster, 1 copy of Monster Reborn, 2 copies of the Resonator Call, 1 copy of Return of the Dragon Lords, 2 copies of Lightning Storm, back row hate, back row hate, back row hate. That's why we're playing 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster, 2 copies of Lightning Storm for that Labyrinth matchup, as well as that Trap Tricks matchup. You want to be able to clear that back row. Must clear back row. Always clear back row. 2 copies of Emergency Teleport. Like I said, small assault engine. You don't essentially need the assault teleport, but it's really good because you may get your what's the card called, quick launch. You may get that Ash, so having the e-teleport is really good as a backup. You play 2 copies of the quick launch, 1 copy of the assault mode active, 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Let's run through the extra deck real quick, then I will explain some of the main deck combos that you want to see. 1 copy of the TG Hyper Librarian, 1 copy of the Samsara, 1 Garden Rose Maiden, 1 Blue Sirius, 1 Quantum Dragon, and 1 copy of each of the Red Dragons. The original OG Red Dragon Archfiend, the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend, and the Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend. And pending on the field scenario or the situation on board, each one of the effects will pay dividends. One copy of the Chaos Ruler, this is self-explanatory. One copy of Abyss, one copy of Bane, one copy of Tyrant, one copy of Red Nova, one copy of the King Calamity, one copy of the Red Supernova Dragon. Let me hit on two of these in the extra deck. The Samsara as well as the Garden Rose Maiden. These are used to get access back to your red dragons in the graveyard, all except for Tyrant. Tyrant cannot be special summoned from the graveyard. But your Samsara, once it's destroyed by battle or card effect, you actually have a monster reborn effect with his effect, because you also get access to your opponent's graveyard as well. But the main purpose is in your force to get access back to your red dragons. Meaning if they Kaiju, Lava Golem, Sphere Mode, Santa Claus, Volcanic Queen, your monster all off the board, such as your Red Supernova, and doesn't give the chance for the effect to activate, you can then follow up on your following turn by making these synchros such as Samsara or your Garden Rose Maiden and getting it back on board, as well as any of your other red dragons except for Tyrant. Your main deck combos that you really want to see, you do want to see quick launch with either your emergency teleport or your resonator call. It's basically full combo, being able to summon out any of your rare dragons. I can break down and explain why for you guys. Quick launch, special summon, you get out the Rocket Tracer, then you follow up by playing resonator call or your emergency teleport, and what this does is you would chain Rocket Tracer's effect to that spell, so that you can either get your level 1 non-tuner Rocket Dragon on board or your level 4, pending on what the field situation is and what you are aiming to summon. Your main focus should always be, if possible, Hyper Librarian, and then continue synchro summoning so that you can draw into your hand traps for your opponent's turn. You always want to have some sort of disruption for your opponent's turn. So your first goal is to try to get into that Librarian. Once you get into that Librarian, continue synchroing up so you can draw a whole host of your hand traps. But that is the main combo you want to see. Quick launch with your emergency teleport or your resonator call. Trigger off and then continue synchroing up. This, in my opinion, would be the second best out of all the Red Dragon decks that I've done so far. I will attempt the fifth one to see how it performs, and then I will upload that for you guys so you guys would be able to see that firsthand. On to the next one. This is a combo centric version. This focuses more on comboing off than anything else. It doesn't play that many hand traps, just 2 Maxi and 1 Nibiru. The engine really focuses on that Dust Dawnwalker combo along with the performance package. You just basically pitch either the Damage Juggler, and the reason why I made this version is because Damage Juggler is excellent at preventing FTKs via burn. So you can go, if you open with the Damage Juggler, you can pitch it to keep yourself from getting FTK'd, as well as it combos off well, especially if you get the chain summoning to go off. Let's run through the main deck real quick. Oh, not only that, it has excellent negate because of Claire and Crystal Wing, and it's not restricted in terms of only summoning darks. You can go Starter's Charge Warrior into Claire Wing into Crystal Wing in your extra deck, out of your extra deck, so that you're not locked out. You can also go Red Wyvern, pop your opponent's strongest monster, synchro up to Claire Wing, synchro up to Crystal Wing, and with Return of the Dragon Lord, self-explanatory on what you are bringing back. But you would not be restricted to only darks. Playing the Rocket Engine restricts you to darks. You don't have to worry about being restricted to only being able to summon dark monsters from your extra deck. So if you do end up in a Sword Souls matchup, you don't have to worry about only darks. You have ways of getting around that with this combo version. You play 1 copy of Supé, 2 copies of Jet Synchron, 2 copies of the Synchron Resonator, 2 copies of Chain Resonator, 1 Red Nova, 2 copies of the Mark C, 2 copy of Red Resonator, 1 copy of Fire Ant Aster, however you pronounce it, 1 Creation Resonator, 2 copies of Damage Juggler, 1 copy of Heart Tricker, 1 copy of Trick Clown. You get access when you send this to the graveyard, or keep yourself from getting FTK'd. 2 copies of the Red Gardener, self-explanatory. 3 copies of the Dawn Walker, 3 copies of the Dust Walker, 1 copy of Nibiru, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, back row hate. Monster Reborn, 1 for 1. 3 copies of the Resonator Call, 2 copies of Return of the Dragon Lords, 2 copies of Lightning Storm, back row hate. 3 copies of Chain Summoning. Once you trigger off Chain Summoning, you really want to see your Chain Resonator with Synchron Resonator. Ensure that Chain Resonator meets the graveyard via Synchro Summon and Synchron Resonator to revive. At that point, Hyper Librarian's effect would go off to draw a card, and Synchron Resonator to recover the Chain Resonator would then go off as Chain 2, and you can always trigger your Chain Summoning as Chain 3. And same thing as the previous deck, you want to see Hyper Librarian first and keep synchroing up. So even if you don't open with the Chain Summoning, if you draw into it and that sequence of effects triggers Hyper Librarian, Synchron Resonator to recover Chain, you can go Chain Summoning and continue prying Resonators out as you continue synchroning up and drawing more cards and extending your combo plays. And your extra deck, 1 TG Hyper Librarian, 1 Axel Synchron, 1 Garden Rose Maiden, 1 Red Raven, 1 Stardust Charge Warrior, 1 Clearwing, 1 Quantum Dragon, 2 Scarlights, 1 Crystal Wing, 1 Abyss, 1 Bane, 1 Tyrant, 1 Red Nova Dragon, and 1 King Calamity. This, in my opinion, would be the weakest out of the 4. It doesn't have many hand traps to disrupt your opponent, but when it does set up a board, that board is really solid. It really is comboing off, and you can draw a plethora of cards, meaning that your following turn you are not going to be shy any number of plays. On to the third one, which is also a combo centric version. This, in my opinion, would be the third strongest out of all, the first one being the second, that one being the weakest out of the 4, and this one being the third strongest. Just to show you guys how versatile summoning the Red Dragon can be, this one utilizes the Brilliant Fusion engine. We don't play Lightning Storm in this, we play Twin Twisters, because the Brilliant Fusion usually gets left face up, which turns off your Lightning Storms, and that hurts, especially against heavy set back row decks like Labyrinth and Trap Tricks. Also Dinomorphia, another heavy trap based deck. You need those for those matchups. Back row hate, and I'm gonna keep expressing that. Back row hate. Also keep in mind the card choices. If I haven't said it already, card choices during deck selection are all player preference. You do not have to play what I play. Play what works for you. This one plays 2 Garnites, 1 Effect Veiler, 2 Jet Synchrons, 2 Synchron Resonators, 2 Chain Resonators, 3 of the Mark C, 2 Red Resonators, and this is for that Reborn Tengu to get it on board. Once he leaves the field, he's going to bring another copy of himself, and all you do is keep putting a tuner on board and keep synchro summoning. That is the reason for Axel Synchron, because he is a synchro tuner that can send Jet Synchron to the graveyard, so you can reduce his level to 4. Another Reborn comes on board. You can make a Synchro 8. Jet Synchron's in the graveyard, bring him back to the field, and you can go into an Abyss. Play 1 copy of Creation Resonator, you play 1 copy of Rise Bell, 1 copy of Ghost Ogre, and in this version, this is not an error, 1 copy of Ghost Ogre. 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 1 copy of Bell, 3 copies of Reborn Tengu, 1 copy of the Trick Clown, 2 copies of Nibiru, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, 1 Monster Reborn, 1 Pot of Adverse, 1 for 1, 2 copies of Resonator Call, 2 Return of the Dragon Lords, 1 Brilliant Fusion. Superb, just excellent. I wish this was actually at 2. 2 copies of Emergency Teleport, and the E-Teleport is actually for that same Ghost Ogre and that Rizabel. Depending on the field situation, you may need a tuner as well as a non-tuner, and whichever one you need, you want to have a card that can get you access to either or, so you can continue synchroing on up. Rizabel can adjust it or any other monster's level on the field by up to 3, so you do have access into getting into any of your other monsters in your extra deck. 2 copies of Twin Twister and 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence. In the extra deck, you play 1 copy of Seraphonite, 1 copy of Hyper Librarian, 1 copy of Axel Synchron, 1 copy of the Garden Rose Maiden, 1 Red Raven, 1 Stardust Charge Warrior, 1 Clearwing, 1 Quantum Dragon, 2 Scarlights, 1 Crystal Wing, 1 Abyss, 1 Bane, 1 Red Nova Dragon, and 1 King Calamity. That's basically it for the deck. It's like a better version of version 2 with more hand traps, but it doesn't extend with a 3rd normal summon to draw as many cards. On to the last one, which I feel is the best one thus far. This one utilizes the Resonate engine with the Assault engine, as well as a very small Dustwalker engine. We'll run through the main deck real quick. 1 Supé, 2 copies of Synchron Resonator, 2 copies of Chain Resonator, 1 copy of Red Nova, 2 copies of Psy Reflector, 3 copies of the Maxi, 1 Red Resonator, 2 Crimson Resonators, 1 Creation Resonator, 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 3 copies of Bell, 1 Assault Beast, 2 copies of the Red Gardener, 3 copies of the Wandering King Wildwind, 2 copies of Dustwalker, 1 Lava Golem, 1 Sphere Mode. Don't worry about their effects, not allowing you to normal summon, and I'll explain why. 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, 1 Monster Reborn, 1 1-for-1, 2 copies of Resonator Call, 2 copies of Return of the Dragon Lords, 2 Lightning Storms, along with Harpy's Feather Duster Back Row Hate. 2 copies of the Emergency Teleport to get you access to your Assault engine, 2 Resonator Commands, and 1 Assault Mode active. The reason why we don't play 3 Resonator Calls is simply because Resonator Command also gets you access to your Resonator, so it's like having 4 Resonator Calls. With Resonator Command, it gets you access to your level 4 Fiend type, level 4 lower Fiend type monsters, which would be your Red Gardener and Wandering King Wildwind. I'll further explain the combos after we run through the extra deck real quick. 1 Hyper Librarian, like I said, this is the guy you want to see first out of all your synchro players, and then continue synchroing on up. 1 copy of the Garden Rose Maiden, 3 copies of the Red Rising Dragon, 1 copy of each of the Red Dragons, the OG Red Dragon Archfiend, Hot Red Dragon Archfiend, and Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend. 1 copy of Chaos Ruler, self-explanatory. 1 Abyss, 1 Bane, 1 Tyrant, 1 Red Nova Dragon, 1 King Calamity, and the best Red Dragon of them all, Red Supernova Dragon. Combo wise, the reason why we're playing the Sphere Mode and the Lava Golem as board breakers is going to restrict your normal summon, but this deck heavily special summons using Crimson Resonator's effect as well as Wandering King Wildwind. You can easily go into your Red Rising Dragon. He would bring back your Crimson Resonator, and you literally make any of your Red Dragons as you see fit. There is literally no breaks on this deck. If you don't utilize the effect of Lava Golem or Sphere Mode, in addition to that, you can go with the Chain Synchron combo and keep on synchroning your way up. And if Hyper Librarian is on board, you get access to your hand traps, your Maxi, your Ash, your Ghost Bell, and that during your opponent's turn is going to cause a great deal of disruption, either forcing them to either stall or try to press through, and you can always Ash and Bell accordingly. And in addition to that, if Abyss is on board, that is another face-up negate you have at your disposal. And OTKing your opponent is very easy when it comes to Red Dragons. You guys have seen between the 4 versions of the decks in action, and you will continue to see them in action, comboing off, and just being an annoyance or a nuisance for the meta. But this is all 4 of the deck breakdowns in their entirety. Their weakness, like I said, their main weakness, especially with the extra deck, is if you run into that Sword Souls matchup with that Whim monster that can select attribute as dark, you get locked out of your extra deck, so that is going to hurt. In this deck, you have access to Lava Golem and Sphere mode to out that. If you don't get them, it hurts. You do have Maxi, so if they open up the combo off, you're going to draw some cards. Hopefully you can draw into it. If not, like I said, it's going to hurt. Also, Nibiru is also the main issue versus all Red Dragon decks, like I stated. Comboing off. If you can't get into a Crystal Wing or into a Negate in time to turn him off, then Nibiru is also always going to be troublesome versus this deck. You don't really have to worry too much. Your opponent does have to have it in hand, but this is just something you need to keep in mind in terms of the weakness of your deck. Also, this deck, the decks that are combo centric, if your opponent can restrict the number of summons, such as with that what's it called, Shadow All monster, can't remember the name at the moment, then it is also going to hurt. We have Lava Golem in Sphere mode. Hopefully they can get past that. But try to ensure as much as possible using Ash that Shadow Fusion doesn't go off the dump from the deck to summon her in any way, shape, form, or fashion, or the trap card that they use to summon her, or it's going to restrict you and it's going to hurt any of the builds of Red Dragon by restricting the number of summons you can attempt. The floodgates in the back row 8, Happy's Feather, Duster, Lightning Storm, so you don't have to worry about those. But making sure that you are aware of the weaknesses of the deck helps you to play your cards better. And that's all I have for you guys with these 4 versions. I will attempt a 5th one and let you guys know how it go. But yeah, until next time, later.